So Julian Krause released this video almost a year ago, and in it, Julian fully lays out the fundamentals of why this myth is, well, a myth. And here's my too long didn't watch. Audio is math, and 2 plus 2 is never going to be 3. But let me explain. Sound waves are not being rejected by any microphones. It's more about how sensitive a microphone is to the vibrations of sound, and dynamic mics can be less sensitive just due to their mechanical nature. But unless you're putting your podcast out with a waveform that looks like this, it doesn't matter, because all audio we listen to is about perceived loudness. Meaning if I record a sound with this microphone at the same time as this microphone in the same position and add gain to both signals to match their perceived loudness, you will hear off-axis the same, provided they have the same polar patterns, that is. The difference is you're going to have to gain up the mics with different amounts to get the same perceived loudness. Or like in my situation, I have 2 wildly different gain levels applied to these 2 microphones to give them the same perceived loudness, and they've got to be set up, and we'll do that in a second. But why don't we share those numbers right here? But then, if all of this is true, what did Julian not do in his video? So I think I should probably word this differently, because Julian actually did explain what I'm about to do. He just used a different principle of the same audio going into the microphone, like a voice, causing similar reverby sounds to get back into the microphone. It's a relatively elegant solution, but perhaps a simpler approach here is necessary. You see, he focused on what happens at different distances of the mic from a sound source and how you can create more room in a recording. Cool. But again, we're looking at one of these microphones being better at rejecting sound. So then, why not record a sound that is off axis with both microphones with the exact same gain staging for perceived loudness? Instead of just showing the sound of it, this approach will give you hard facts, literal numbers. Don't believe me? Let's go see what happens. Okay, so my setup. I've got a phone set up with a metronome app just behind this camera. I'm going to walk around and I'm going to play that metronome sound. And while I'm recording, we're going to be as quiet as possible, okay? Now, both of these mics, as I've already stated, have been gained up so that the output of their sound is as close as I can get it. And I'm using amplitude statistics in Audition to illustrate this. Now, with this audio being recorded straight on, I'm seeing a difference of about half a dB. I know it's not perfectly scientific, but that's just part of my charm. So let's do this, which I've got to walk around there. So I'll be right back. And you're going to see the results are well within a margin of error compared to my audio recorded straight on with the microphones. Again, these numbers are math, binary, right or wrong. They can't really be argued because 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 3 here. Now, you may have noticed I kind of skipped over polar patterns for their off-axis rejection, and I decided not to include those. It's a little bit more math involved. I didn't know what the appetite was for that. If you want to see a video on polar patterns, let me know. I'm happy to do one. Again, it might be a little bit more math than most people are used to seeing on this channel, but it's probably a worthy conversation to have, way more so than dynamic versus condenser. So let me know down below. So why does this myth exist? Well, it all comes down to perception for sure. Now, if you missed my previous videos on perception of audio, they are fun watches unless you get your heart broken easily. However, I do recommend them highly. Now, this is something that Julian did break down in his videos, but let me reinforce the point. You see, dynamic mics like this one have much lower sensitivity and tend to be used much closer to the mouth. This in turn requires less gain applied in post, as well as in the actual recording process. But it also does something else. It naturally makes us not speak as loud, especially when we have our headphones on. But with condensers, they tend to be moved away from your mouth, thus causing us to not only speak louder, but also just the very fact that the mic is further away from your mouth means it's going to be picking up more room. A common trick if you're using a condenser in an untreated room is to get close and lower your voice. You will literally have the same outcome as a dynamic by doing this. You see, a couple years ago, I did a video on mic shields, and I recorded some of that in my kitchen, a horrendously untreated space. And I got more than a couple comments on how my kitchen sounded better than the listeners' studios. But that's just because I was using proper mic technique. I was getting close to the mic and not raising my voice. This is literally all you have to do. And whether you bust this myth with the hard numbers and facts as Julian did, or with the very unscientific evidence that I use, the result is going to be the same. There's no such thing as the best mic for an untreated room. However, there is the best mic technique for an untreated room. But again, as I've said many times, the idea that you're going out and spending a bunch of money on an expensive mic, but nothing on the treatment around it, it's kind of like buying a Ferrari and parking it in a barn. That analogy is so bad and it makes no sense, but somehow you know what I mean, right? Treatment also doesn't need to be expensive. Clutter works, but using a tool like a microphone can still take practice to master. Just because you keep missing a nail with the hammer doesn't mean it's the hammer's fault. I gotta work on my analogies. But what do you think? Am I wrong? Let me know down below. Cheers, guys, and thanks for watching.